Thank you everyone for coming tonight. My name is Diana Donlin, and I know most of you, but for those of you who don't know me, that's who I am. Welcome to the Hivery. This is a women's co-working space, and men are welcome to join as well, but it's predominantly the women members. So we are filming the program tonight. I'll just give you a little information about that for Marin TV, and then this makes it sort of a hybrid event because it's not only an event, but it's also content creation, because this will have a life after the event, and then we can share John's important, inspiring messages with more people. So I want to just tell you a little bit about who I am, what I'm up to, and then introduce our illustrious speaker that I first met in Marrakesh a couple of years ago at one of the climate conferences on a beautiful rooftop. And he just wowed me with his vision of ecosystem restoration camps that at that time did not yet exist. So he articulated this amazing concept, and I was working along with my friend Sylvia at the time at another nonprofit and really focused on content creation. But I have recently embarked on my own venture, and I have a three-pronged approach. The new venture is called Regen Future, and the tagline is illuminating pathways to ecosystem regeneration. So how do we do that? Well, we do that by bringing more people into the movement, because there's so many people that want to work on these issues, but they aren't really sure what their contribution can be. So this will really serve as a hub, a platform, to help people find their path. And then that will be supported by some content creation. There's my friend Rebecca in the back from Fivershed, and my friend Heather in the front. We're already working on some content creation together, some co-branding opportunities. And then events, because those of us that have been exposed to these inspiring messages we have a lot of opportunity to hear amazing people and meet amazing people, but the general public really doesn't. So we thought it would just be great to have more events that are open to the public so that they can meet amazing people like John and don't have to go all the way to Marrakesh to do so. So John is an ecosystem ambassador with the Common Land Foundation in the Netherlands, and he is also, I have to get out the card and read this because I can't remember it, a visiting fellow at the Netherlands Institute of Ecology. But in my mind, John is really an amazing thinker, and he is really connecting the dots about so many issues that we're facing, and really has a very deep understanding of how natural systems work and should work, and how we as civilized human beings can be in service to the natural world instead of just assuming that it's all going to be downhill and that is inevitable. So his ecosystem camp initiative is a global network. It's just, they have their first camp up and running in Murcia, Spain, and I'm going to turn it over to John so that he can tell you about his vision and the principles that underlie this work.
I know what you're thinking. Another Chinese stand-up comic. Thought I'd try that out. Well, it's wonderful to be here. I'm so grateful that you're all here and grateful that I can be here. I rarely get to the United States these days. I don't know why that is exactly, but for some reason, I am spending much more time in Europe, and I live in China. But I want to show you some video. So I think some of you know a little bit about what I do, but others might not. So are we ready to show this? Can we? I think maybe it will work enough. Don't you think? No? Why don't we try it with, because if this shows up, I think it's a lot darker than it was earlier. So anyway, I want to tell you that in 1979, I went to China. I was born in Nashville, Tennessee. I didn't actually learn English by listening to the Voice of America. I went to China in 1979 to help open the CBS News Bureau. And I worked in China for a number of years. Have you started or is it paused? It's paused. Okay. Anyway, I covered stories for the news. I worked for CBS News for about a decade, and then I worked for Radio Televisione Italiana and then Zweites Deutsches Fernsehen. So the stories that I covered were the rise of China from poverty and isolation, the Tiananmen tragedy, the collapse of the Soviet Union, terrorism in Pakistan and Middle East. And I also got to know a lot about the media in doing that. We got to interview Deng Xiaoping for 60 minutes. I worked with Mike Wallace, and it was really an interesting time. But I also came away with a feeling that there was something fundamentally wrong with the media, and that I learned something else. And it was this film that I made at the time of the Copenhagen COP15. So I'm just going to show you a 7-minute excerpt from Hope in a Changing Climate. So let's look at that. And hopefully the sound will come on.
This is China's Lus Plateau. Until recently, this was one of the poorest regions in the country. A land renowned for floods, mudslides, and famine. But with the fanfare comes the hope of change for the better. My name is John D. Liu. I've been documenting the changes on the plateau for 15 years. I first came here in 1995 to film an ambitious project where local people were constructing a new landscape on a vast scale, transforming a barren land into a green and fertile one. The project certainly changed my life, convincing me to become a soil scientist. The lessons I've learned in the last few years have made me realize that many of the human tragedies that we regularly witness around the world, the floods, mudslides, droughts, and famines, are not inevitable. Here on the Lus Plateau, I've witnessed that people can lift themselves out of poverty. They can radically improve their environment, and by doing so, reduce the threat of climate change. One thing that became apparent early on is the connection between damaged environments and human poverty. In many parts of the world, there's been a vicious cycle. Continuous use of the land has led to subsistence agriculture, and generation by generation, this has further degraded the soils. The vital question we have to ask is, can this destructive process be reversed? When I first filmed Mr. Ta Fuyuan and his colleagues back in 1995, I had no idea this initiative could achieve such dramatic results. The effort that people put into converting their slopes into terraces has resulted in a marked increase in agricultural productivity. The higher yields are directly related to the return of natural vegetation in the surrounding ecological land. As a result of its success, the lessons learned from the Loess Plateau rehabilitation are now being applied all over China. But could such projects work elsewhere in less centrally controlled societies, with fewer resources and different soils? Ethiopia, perhaps more than any other country, has come to symbolize the vulnerability of humankind to environmental catastrophe. This is a country whose problems have been increased by war and civil conflict. And now, human-induced climate change is predicted to make matters worse. As on the Loess Plateau, centuries of subsistence farming practices have stripped the land of natural vegetation. The dry gullies bear the scars of flash floods.
These gullies are evidence of the enormous power of runoff during the rainy season. Without vegetation cover on the hillsides, when the rains come, the water doesn't soak into the ground but flows away in a flood. Then it's not available for agriculture during the rest of the year. This leads to drought, and famously for Ethiopia, famine.
But just as I've witnessed in China, there is hope that the situation here can be reversed.
Yeah, that root could survive? No.
In just 6 years, Professor Legessa Nagash and local villagers have transformed a severely eroded terrain by planting indigenous trees and plants. Almost miraculously, a clear flowing stream has emerged where once there was a muddy trickle.
How is it that it's possible for you to get the stream to flow throughout the year?
It is because of the vegetation cover, which has been regenerating on this mountain. This water is maintaining the landscape because as soon as rain falls on the canopy, on this vegetation, that rain then infiltrated gradually into the ground, ending up with this steady flow of this river.
If we were to restore the vast areas of the planet where we humans have degraded the soils, just think what an impact we would have in taking carbon out of the atmosphere. As much as a quarter of the world's land mass has been degraded, and much could be rehabilitated in the way we have seen on the Loess Plateau. And we've only just begun to recognize the real value of natural capital. Surely investing in the recovery of damaged environments is a cost-effective way of solving many of the problems we face today.
What we've seen in China, in Africa, and around the world is that it's possible to rehabilitate large-scale damaged ecosystems. If we can transfer the capital, the technology, and empower the local people to restore their own environment, it'll have enormous benefits. Restoration can sequester carbon, reduce biodiversity loss, mitigate against flooding, drought, and famine. It can ensure food security for people who are now chronically hungry. Why don't we do this on a global scale? So we can pause that for a moment. So this was made at the time of Copenhagen. And I don't know if you remember, but the Copenhagen COP15 was touted to be was going to have a political outcome with a new agreement and so on. It didn't happen. And the reason I think it didn't happen is because there wasn't an agreement about what to do. And what many of the people had been talking about was mechanical sequestration. So somehow we're going to make a machine to suck carbon out of the atmosphere. But the fact is that the entire atmosphere was created by photosynthesis over evolutionary time. We have a photoreactive biochemical reaction which does this. Why would we think that we could build a machine, which we need to extract, use more energy, burn more carbon to make a machine that would do what nature can do much better? So this film was broadcast on the BBC worldwide at the time of the Copenhagen COP15. It was repeated a number of times. It's now been shown all over the world. And it's emerged as a way forward. So now you'll hear regeneration, restoration in everything. But when we started to talk about this, it was nowhere. Now, there are certain principles. Okay, let's look at the next film. This one is less important about audio, but you can have some audio, it doesn't matter. But basically, what I learned was that when the Earth was formed, it was a molten rock surrounded with gases which we couldn't breathe. You could call them poisonous gases, but you know, they're just gases, really. And then biological life began, and the Earth was transformed into a beautiful garden. And this took place over evolutionary time. So you have geologic time and you have evolutionary time. And it was a photoreactive biochemical process which created the atmosphere, and it constantly filtered and continuously renewed it. And it caused the creation of the organic layer, which is the basis of soil fertility. And it created this ability to release nutrients. Microbiologic communities live in this layer and release mineral nutrients from geologic materials, making them available. And it's the basis of the hydrological cycle, the infiltration and retention of moisture. And it's the basis of the amazing biodiversity throughout the Earth. So all the systems that we rely on for life are interconnected. There is no way to separate us from these. And what's interesting is the canopy is there. The canopy is the place where the solar radiation starts to diffuse. It doesn't directly hit the soils. If the sunlight directly hits the soils, the temperature differentials are hugely different. If the temperature differentials are hugely different, what is the outcome? So into this, through evolution, we end up with human beings. And when human beings emerge in this paradise, it's exactly the same as it says in our religious texts. Human beings emerge in paradise. And if you study evolution from this point of view, human beings emerged in paradise. And so since these two things seem to correlate, we might want to think about the next part of the cosmology that our religious texts say, which is that human beings sinned and they were cast out of paradise. And for me, I don't understand the snake and the apple thing, you know, but if it's not literal, and that's cheetahs nursing in the wild. That's just to make you like me. It's like a cat video on the internet. But when you consider this, what is it that human beings did? They reduced biodiversity. Reducing biodiversity caused a reduction in biomass. Reducing biomass caused a reduction in the accumulation of organic matter. This means that gas exchange from photosynthesis was massively reduced. It means that temperature differentials were wildly increased. Evaporation rates were wildly increased. All of the things which we are experiencing are caused by this. And what we saw in China is that it's possible to rehabilitate large-scale damaged ecosystems. It's not necessary to accept degraded states. But it also means that we have to make that the central intention of human civilization. Because right now we're expressing, first of all, in a sense we've been expressing activities which are based on ignorance and greed. I think I'd like you to pause for a moment because I think it's going to take off into the, maybe let it go until you see that it's going to the next bit, and then pause because I don't want to go too far. This is Páramo. When the Spanish, when the Spanish went to South America and they saw this area, they named it Páramo. It means like wasteland. This is huge, beautiful sponge highland wetland system. It's ridiculous to see it as wasteland. It's massively biodiverse. It's very functional. Anyway, what we found in China and around the world was whenever you try to do restoration, it works. But you have to understand it's not necessarily easy, but it is possible. And in order for us to successfully do this, you can turn those back on for a moment. In order to do this successfully, we need to make it the central intention. And what we're doing now is we're expressing that the central purpose and the central reason for social cohesion and organization is to go shopping, to extract and to buy and sell things. And we've created a materialistic society. And the great tragedy about this materialistic society is that it doesn't actually bring you any satisfaction. So the more you try to accumulate material things, then the more you want. And when you get more, it still doesn't satisfy you, so you want even more. And the fact is now we're at 7.5 plus billion people on the planet. And we're adding about 1 billion people every 12 years. And it's simply impossible to continuously grow, infinitely grow an economy based on finite resources. So as we look at this scenario at the moment, we're suggesting that we need more jobs, we need more growth, we need more sales. Well, that's not going to work. We need to sit down and meditate about this because we need to learn how to share. There is enough for everyone, but not if individually we're trying to grasp as much as we can. And we also need to realize that there's a fundamental mistake in our economic thinking. It's not only that it's impossible to infinitely grow an economy based on finite resources, there's more mistakes here. Because what we have done is we've said, and I think this is very close to the original sin concept. We've said that what we extract, manufacture, and buy and sell is more valuable than the Earth's systems themselves. And this is fundamentally untrue. So you can believe that if you want to, but you're not right. And it's very close to the idea of the goose that lays the golden egg. So if you think the golden egg is the valuable thing and you kill the goose, then that's what you have. But if you don't kill the goose and it just keeps laying golden eggs, you have a lot more. And the Earth's natural systems are like that. And so 25 years ago, I went out to the Lys Plateau and I was supposed to do this baseline study and I just became obsessed. And I kept studying it, and they keep, I don't know, I dropped out of college to be a television cameraman, but now they keep giving me fellowships to different places. And I've spoken at the Royal Academy twice in Britain, and the Royal Society in Britain, and the Royal Academy in Stockholm, and all over the world. But what I have found is that we actually have to shift our understanding and realize that the natural ecological systems are vastly more valuable than anything that human beings have ever made, and everything that human beings will ever make. And that we're just passing through, that we're here for a very short time. And many generations of life have come before us, and God willing, many more generations of life will come after us. And that we have an obligation to learn and to understand. Because what we're basically doing here, so we may be from different parts of the world, different cultures, but we're communicating with each other. And we're creating a collective consciousness. And we have a worldview. And if our worldview is that the purpose of life is to go shopping, then we're existing in a degraded state. And what we need to realize is that our families, our time, the beauty of the earth and joyousness, that's the true value. And everyone has a right to that. Every living thing has a right to that. And we have now kind of perverted this, and we need to very carefully consider, because we see the consequences. Actually, if you read the religious text a little further, then you see that the consequences are also spelled out. It says, you will reap the whirlwind. When you study temperature differentials on exposed soils, I found 45 degrees centigrade temperature differentials that are caused by human beings. So if you have a vegetated, that's an anomaly. That's the highest I've found. So that's if you have in the desert. If you go to my academia site, you can look at all the papers, but one in a study that was done in the Taklamakan. The Taklamakan is a desert in northwest China. The name means you go in, but you don't come out. So it's not a nice place. And the Chinese built a shelter belt of vegetation through the middle of the Taklamakan because they can. And I don't think that's a good idea to go to the most outrageous places and build, vegetate them, because we have a lot more work to do than that. But the fact that they can means that if we want to restore the Mediterranean or sub-Saharan Africa or the Central Asia or the Middle East, we can do it. So actually, we've been looking at very interesting things in terms of the Middle East, Egypt and other places. And there are tremendous designs and potential for restoration, which will change the entire outcome for human civilization. We have data sets from Rwanda and Ethiopia from 12 years of restoration, and the outcomes are very good. And I wanted to tell you about the ecosystem restoration camps concept, because as I was doing this, it's now 25 years. And what we saw was that the World Bank, the United Nations, the Global Environment Facility, the nation states, the corporations, they're going to fail. And the fact is, they're slow. organizations, and they're designed for something else. They're designed to protect the status quo. And what we're looking at is a need and the possibility of transformational change. So it's actually possible to rehabilitate all the degraded landscapes on the earth. I would say if you're interested in the actual areas, contact me. Let's talk about it. Coastal regions, there's inevitable sea level rise. And so we need to work in certain areas. The concept, it's a physics concept of thermal expansion. As the seas increase in temperature, the volume increases. We're committed to this. There's no other possibility. So what I've been looking at now is the concept of subsidence and accumulation. And in cultural outcomes, we cover the land with tarmac and cement. We compact everything. We need to stop that. We need to go very lightly on the earth. And I think indigenous people, the way that they lived, the way that they thought about the sacredness of all life, we need to study this. And how can we do that? Well, we can come to a place and talk about it, but a better way is to go out into the land and to live together quietly. So let's turn on this thing, and I want to show you this next thing, and we'll forego the fourth one because I'm being told I talk too much.
The movement that we're building here together is about bringing back hope. It's about bringing back purpose in life.
The biggest problem that exists on our planet Earth now is climate change.
So as a result, we're facing so many problems, but the solution to them is the same. We start restoring the ecology, the ecosystems.
If we apply regenerative techniques to bring it back to life, this is enough to reverse climate change.
The purpose of ecosystem restoration camps is to restore land that has been degraded by humans.
What we need to do is go to the historically degraded landscapes, which were once the Garden of Eden.
Volunteers can come from around the world, or they can be local community members, volunteering 5 hours a day, helping to restore the planet.
We are ecosystem restoration camps. You're not waiting for somebody else to do the work. You join a group that is actually restoring this planet.
I quit my studies to come here to do a little bit of service, to give myself to the planet.
This is the thing that I wanted to do. This is the tribe that I want to join. Can be a solution bigger than the things that I can do alone.
This is where I want to be. This is what I want to be doing.
We need to stand up together. We're a new international of green-minded people.
It's a viral concept. That's why it's so strong. It starts with one camp. A lot of people going through that camp, they bring the idea home. They may start new camps.
To go from a very degraded ecosystem back to a fully functional ecosystem, everybody opened their eyes and are like, oh, it's that simple.
Desert used to be productive lands and could be made productive again.
It is possible to change a landscape from a desert and to completely regreen it so that there's food, water, and wildlife in abundance.
I think the camp also can teach us that we can live with very simple, eat the food we grow, sleep under the stars, and still have our comfort.
Camps is a simple way. People get closer to the earth and to the ecosystems themselves, and it's easy to implement and it doesn't leave traces.
A great place to experiment for scientists, a great place to learn how to grow food, how to become more self-sufficient.
Soil is the basis of life.
If you have a soil that has no life, nothing good can grow from there.
So by restoring the ecosystem, which involves restoring the soil, adding more organic matter to the soil and more life, that soil will hold the water much longer, will hold much more nutrients, and that way bring back fertility.
As we start planting trees, We start taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. We start that process of reversing climate change.
This area in Spain, for example, is one of the most abandoned areas in Spain. Degradation of the ecosystem mirrors in the degradation of society.
Not just about restoring the land, it's also about restoring the societies, restoring people.
With new people coming in and new knowledge coming in, connecting with local. So the bakery at the local village has a better business too.
Farmers will be an example of how to do things that they can copy on their land.
Be an inspiration for the region, for other farmers who are here struggling, but also for young people maybe to come back to the land and like see that farming is actually can be cool.
Let's kind of bring back the spirit of childhood, of game, but of projects, of doing things together. I think that the camp will bring back that possibility of playing like a kid, but with a purpose.
So the more that ordinary people like you and me are able to stand up and support it, the more momentum that it's going to get.
Many initiatives all around the world are popping up. Everybody wants to make a camp now. That's fantastic, and that's what we wanted. We wanted to inspire the people to take initiative.
You can come to camp. I think that would be a really great option for someone who is available and wants to do something meaningful. They're going to be offering permaculture design courses here. But if you can't come, you can become a member of ecosystem restoration camps by donating €10 per month. That's just a really simple way to basically make these camps a reality.
We want to restore the earth. We want to live in the beautiful paradise that the earth is.
Come to ecosystem restoration camps and make part of the solution. Join other like-minded people who say, yeah, we can do it. We can reverse this biggest problem ever existed.
Going back to the ground, getting dirty, getting back to the soil with love, with joy, with compañerismo and camaradería is definitely going to make this happen.
So, yeah. So I hope you'll all join. We've got lots of these things, and on the website you can join, but I want to just say a few more words and then we'll have a conversation. I think that these camps, there's an obligation from those of us who live in privilege. And there are different types of people who would like to go. We have large numbers of highly educated young people who want to go to camp. I think that's wonderful. We need them. There are other groups. Another group that I think we have is retired people who have some time and some skills and would like to serve, and they want to make sure that their children and grandchildren and future generations have a beautiful earth. I think there are really a lot of other groups too. I think that there are migrants who are fleeing from the places in the world where they cannot live anymore. There are refugees who are fleeing from the war zones. There are post-traumatic stress disorder veterans who really need to heal themselves. The highest mortality for American forces is suicide, not enemy combatants. So, you know, if you don't have to fight against an army that's committing suicide, frankly. You need to have pity on them. And, you know, I think the ecosystem restoration camps is an idea that time has come. We're facing existential threats from climate change. We have to act. We have to act as a species on a planetary scale. That doesn't mean we have to act as nationalists. We have to act as humans together. We have to share all of the knowledge and the ability and teach everyone. And that even the people who are who are the most vulnerable, they may be the most important people. So how could they participate? If we create the basic infrastructure and we're willing to live and work with them as equals, then there are millions and billions of people who can work at this. And if we grow soils and we infiltrate and retain moisture and we propagate and plant out indigenous and endemic plants, we can restore the earth. So I do hope you'll all join, and I'm here for you. We can also go to a bar afterwards if you want to. But if you know, whatever you want to talk about, let's talk about it now.
Let's open it up for questions, because I think there's a lot of potential questions, and I know not everybody comes to this with the same amount of knowledge, and we have a lot of practitioners in the room, and we'd love, Seth, you had your hand up first.
Sure, I'll ask a question.
Sure.
Thank you so much for coming out.
Good to be here.
Yeah. So I'm really curious, because you showed us these two totally different things, and the first one is this massive scale restoration of land by a huge state, and the second one is this very small, let's get together with a group of people and start from grassroots, which are hugely different. I'm curious if you could talk about that a little bit.
Okay, I think I have a mic, so you can save that for the questions. But essentially, I think that after I've been doing this, first of all, I am engaged with the United Nations Global Environment Facility, World Bank, all of these people. We're involved in common land with massive privately invested landscape restoration for landowners and farmers and investors. But in doing those things, I think those are necessary things. The governments and the corporations and the landowners, they all have to shift to restoration. But as I look at the world, and I've been to 90 countries as a journalist and as an ecological researcher, and I know that there are billions of people, and there are millions and hundreds of millions of people who are marginalized now. They don't have anything really important to do. They're maybe fleeing, or they're going to drown in the Mediterranean trying to escape, and nobody wants them in Europe anyway. I mean, it's crazy. So for them and for all of us, we need to help them to restore the landscapes. And why are they poor? Why are they disenfranchised? We know why. Because European expansion colonized and enslaved them, and and it changed. This is not an opinion. This is just historical truth, and there's some kind of karma about this. And there's a Hopi legend about a multiracial group of people who restore the earth. Let's use that. Let's just say, okay, fine. you knew what you were talking about. Let's do that. We should do it. So when you start to do this, you find actually there is no satisfaction in chasing material possessions. There's huge satisfaction in restoring ecological function. So if you see a stream returning, it's like, oh, that's great. When you are in the shade instead of burning under the sun, it's completely different. And when you understand, that means we're not creating extreme and erratic weather events. And that means that all kinds of people all over the world are going to be saved from these horrible things that are going to happen if we don't do this. So I think the scale of millions of people doing this is actually larger. So you think it's a small thing, but if we build camps in all continents, and hundreds and then thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of people are trained, and then they take away those skills, that is bigger than the World Bank project. So suddenly, an area the size of the Netherlands being restored, which was what happened in that project, seems small when you think, oh gosh, we could have millions, hundreds of millions, and we have to do this now. We can't do this in 10 or 20 years from now. We're going to be in a completely different place then. Now we have a short window of opportunity where we can do this. And actually, the climate impacts are not in the future. They're already coming. Cities are being wiped out by hurricanes. How many cities have to be wiped out before you say, well, maybe that's something, you know?
I just wanted to point out that the land that in Spain, where the first camp is up and running, was offered to John. And he's had offers all over the world because people gave up on this land. They thought, oh, this land is worthless. And the ecosystem restoration camps don't actually own the land. They're just stewards of the land. So I just wanted to clarify that. I just wanted to clarify. Oh, okay. Sorry. I wanted to clarify that point that it's not like he went and bought land in Spain. It's people are saying, this land is worthless. Take it. We don't want it. We've left it. It's barren. You saw that, they're just...
Those were almond trees without any vegetation. But let me just say, we're not talking about ownership. We're talking about restoring the earth, because the value creation of ecological function is more valuable. And the fact is, nobody owns the land. We're going to die. The land owns us. We're going to give our bodies back. And the organic layer is all the generations of life that have come before us, which have given up their bodies to nurture the next generation. So we're going to do the same. So, once we start understanding in this way, the concept of ownership kind of doesn't really matter, especially if we live there, especially if we can go from place to place. Now, if we're starting to say, well, what's my self-interest in this? Then we have to have a discussion about that. But I think that the minimum place we have to go is mutual benefit. So we're doing something for all humanity and for all life. And the next stage is selflessness. Now that's really hard. I don't know how you get there. But mutual benefit seems like better than selfishness. There's lots of people. I think we should go boy, girl, boy, girl.
I have a comment for you.
Oh no, we have a gender thing?
As a girl, I'm wondering, and maybe following up on your question, if you're restoring land on different parts of the globe and working with different kinds of soil, different pests, different water use, will you give these camps best practices, or do you just let different land managers decide what to do?
What an excellent question. I think what we're building is a global movement with a minimal infrastructure, and that each camp must be self-organizing and self-governing. But we have a very large number of experts from all over the world, and basically everyone who understands this concept and agrees to collaborate is welcome. So you can essentially have all of the best designers. So Dr. John Todd, who's the creator of the living machines and the father of all the constructed wetlands on the planet now, he's in our board, our advisory council. So, people like this, all the different people who want to do this, we are not interested in having like a separate organization. I think we need a network which can share with all the different camps. But basically, we think there should be a huge movement that grows up and that camps form and existing organizations. We now have, we're negotiating with Mexico, Kenya, Nepal, and the Netherlands now. So those are existing organizations that want to have camps and want to be affiliated in a network. So I think that everyone needs to co-create and to collaborate, do collaborative learning, so that we're all studying taxonomy. And so you have a methodology to study taxonomy. You learn the methodology, and then you can study taxonomy wherever you are. And then you can even have, like I've been imagining that we, especially I'm interested in retired people with craft skills. So I imagine engineers who worked in Formula One racing or on repairing aircraft engines, that sort of tolerance levels, and they run beautiful shops. And remember Karate Kid, you know, Mr. Miyagi is, you know, and the kid has to rub on and rub off, you know, and you know, those kids, they want to get in. And if you're talking Africa and some of these other places, they never ever went through the Industrial Revolution. But if you have these like master craftspeople, engineers, and they say, the kids are looking in and they want in and they, yeah, I want the tools, I want to do this, you know, rub on, rub off, you know, and they get in and they say, yeah, come on in, but you clean the floor until you understand that this tool goes here and this tool, and you learn everything, and they'll become the masters. So that's the way forward, I think, for them.
I want to hear from Ariel.
Okay.
I actually do have a question, but I'll go right after Nick.
Yeah,
Okay, so
Nick.
Boy, girl.
Okay.
John, I appreciate your prolific online posting of resources. And in one of those postings, you referenced a body of research talking about how local rainfall patterns changed with deforestation and degradation, and how if you restore strategically in a geographic relationship to the sea, I think this paper was about the Mediterranean, that then you can start to restore those historic rain patterns. And wondering if you know what I'm talking about, if you can share a little bit about, and the implications for partnering with government, perhaps?
This is very large. So this is happening. This is something that you're happening. There are certain facts which you come in, you know, you find. So Professor Milan in the Mediterranean, he's like, he created the Spanish, Canadian, Dutch, and German meteorological systems. And he's been the European climate monitor in the Mediterranean for about 30 years. He's now old. And so, you know, he's just like, sit at his feet, listen to him. You know, he's wonderful. And what he was telling us is, in order to have rainfall, you have to have 21 grams of moisture per kilogram of air. These are like, we ought to all know this. You know, that's pretty good information, isn't it? So, you know, that's critical mass for precipitation. You also need volatile organic compounds, which are respirated by vegetation. You don't have that. You don't have cloud formation. You don't have 21 grams per kilogram of air. And the temperature differentials on exposed soils cause thermal drafts, which drive moisture into the high altitude. It doesn't reach critical mass. It doesn't condense. It doesn't precipitate. What happens to it? It goes into the high altitude, and it's a greenhouse gas. And high altitude moisture is 60% of the greenhouse gases compared to 26% for CO2. So now that's a pretty good fact that it's really outrageous, because What happened to the climate things? They're taken away by this carbon marketing, where the carbon marketers know nothing about climate regulation or carbon sequestration or carbon. They want to control the money. They want to have power over other things. So these are things, you're talking about something which is going to be huge. It isn't public yet.
Nick, I read something, and this may have been a post in response to one of those posts, but apparently sailors centuries ago, when they were out at sea, would look for clouds, and when they saw cloud formation, they knew there was land because there was vegetation. So that knowledge, people did once have that knowledge of looking for the clouds to know that there was land because there was vegetation. But we lost it somewhere.
You touched on this a little bit when you described how it sounds like a lot of these camps are pretty self-organizing and decentralized. But I'm curious, what I've observed over the past decade of working in agriculture and land management is that a lot of the folks working on the ground together, often the relationships devolve into inner discord and strife. The whole firing squad arranged in a circular formation kind of thing. And these are people who maybe agree with the mission statement or have core values in common, so it's not a values discrepancy. So I'm wondering, from what you've seen so far, what are some of the principles for sort of, different governance structures that have worked, and what are some of the pitfalls that you've seen as well, and how can they be avoided?
I think that ecosystem restoration camps are dating. I would say that you don't want to get married today. You want to go on a date. And you want to say, well, what do we agree about? Well, we definitely agree that we want to have functional ecosystems, that our children and our grandchildren's lives depend on it, and future generations of life depend on it. And that's a good place to start. And can we make it for a couple of weeks to study how to grow organic soils and infiltrate and retain moisture and maybe some propagation skills? Maybe we could up that to 2 months or 6 months. We'd probably get along for a while. Okay. Can't get along any longer? Well, maybe we should have more camps and go around and find some other people that we like. But we all need to do this. So we can't say, I've actually heard the best explanation for this. I think it was either, no, it wasn't, I want to say Thich Nhat Hanh because I really like what he has to say, but actually it was Satguru. I don't know if you know this Satguru, Guru Isha. Well, if you listen to Guru Isha, he has a thing on this, and he says, well, if you think that you don't want to get along with these people and that they're just too horrible and, I can't get, well, you better take a deep breath because that's what we got here, And I think that's where we are now. We have humanity. And we can't really say, well, I don't really like them, they should die, and let them die over there, We have to say, wow, wherever you happen to be at this time, those who are alive today are, first of all, those who are alive today are a representation of all life since the beginning of time. So they have equal rights. And they might not be the brightest light on the block, but that's who we have. And so we need to realize that they need to find satisfaction in their lives. We all need to find satisfaction in our lives. And if we kind of get to this place where we have a little bit of tolerance and a little bit of, so I don't know the answer to that. I would say Satguru or Thich Nhat Hanh would be much better to ask that question to than me. What do I know? You know, I mean, I can tell you that 21 grams of moisture in a kilogram of air will, you know, is critical mass in precipitation. And I can tell you that it's possible to restore large-scale damaged ecosystems, because that's what I've witnessed. And I have witnessed that there are millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions and billions of people on the earth, and the majority of them are good. So, you know, if we try, we can do it. There's a knowledgeable person right there.
So, John, thank you for everything tonight. Thank you for all your work. I'd like to nominate a few places in California. One is the Kesterson Ponds, which are down in the Central Valley, which used to and still does have the Pacific Flyway, some of the most diverse bird life anywhere on the West Coast. They're contaminated with selenium from the over-irrigation in the Central Valley. But to create a model, a mental and physical model and biochemical model for the Central Valley to bring it back to life, because it was one of the richest places on the West Coast. You know, they had grizzly bears, they had bird life, they had water everywhere, they had vernal ponds. That's one place. Another place is the salt ponds, the former Morton salt ponds south of Redwood City in the Bay Area. You flew over it on coming in Beijing. You know, when you come up from the south of San Francisco Bay, you all of a sudden see these red ponds and yellow ponds and all these crazy colors. And they're trying to restore that slowly, but that could be another large-scale project, again, with great bird life, the Pacific Flyway, reptiles, amphibians, aquatic life, and you know, the mammals along the coastline. So yeah, I'm just putting it out there. And
my recommendation is you should do it. And my recommendation is that all you need is one landowner or one municipality or one something. In Italy, in France, they're talking about mayors. Mayors have the power to and there will be a camp there. You know, go fix it. You know, we need infiltration. We're flooding. Have drought. Well, how are we going to deal with that? Well, there are lots of people who would go there if the basic infrastructure. Then you have to think, what is it that you really need? You need really good cooks. You need industrial kitchens and the ability to cook really well. And everybody eats. It's not a transaction. This community, everybody eats. And then imagine you need composting toilets. You need to care and figure this out so that it's convenient and it's sanitary and it doesn't smell and it's not grotesque. And you need to figure out how to bathe and how to do the laundry. And then you need really good people who know how to create compost, 17-day compost, you know, massive, rapid composting, huge. You need fungal composts. These fungal composts retain and stimulate the microbial communities much faster, huge carbon sequestration in those things. You don't have to do them again. It's like biochar. You don't have to all the time add more biochar. Just add biochar. It's not going to leave there for hundreds of years, thousands of years. We don't know. So once you start to understand these things, you think, well, we have to do this everywhere. We have to be conscious. We have to be present. This is more important than, well, I mean, we all like Trader Joe's, but, you know, come on. The important thing is that we restore ecological function. So we need nursery systems. Have you been to nurseries lately? You go to a nursery, what do they have? They have decorative plants. They have these like, they have non-native, they have rapid growing, they have all this stuff. They have things that people buy. We need giant nursery systems. The plants that nobody buys, because that's what we need for ecological function. Who's going to do that? Ecosystem restoration camps can do that. Nobody's talking about making money from this. We're talking about restoring the earth. Can you do that? Yeah, well, we can go out and get some seeds, and we can do tissue culturing, we can do all cloning, we can do anything that we decide we're going to do. If you do cloning or tissue culturing, you have to be very careful with your distribution. So you have to do distribution mapping. It's not difficult. You can do this. So, I wouldn't go to genetic modification or anything weird like that, but you can definitely do tissue culturing if you need 1 billion trees. Do it. And anyway, they'll be gone pretty soon, and there'll be other generations of life coming up. And I also noticed that you can start with monocultures. That most of the big restoration things, they don't try to do the climax. They don't plant the climax. They plant the pioneer species. And then 10, 15 years later, you go and it's completely different. Because once the pioneer reaches a certain stage and the other more climax species start growing up, they all die out. And also, there's no weeds. There's no such thing as a weed. It's ludicrous to think about a weed. A weed is just a plant. We don't know what it's for. That's probably the one that sends its taproot way down into the ground and brings the water up to spread it out for all the other life. And when the water fills up and the other life is there, you never see that plant again. So, every place you see nettles or you see all these things all over the place, why are they there? They're there because that's the thing that thrives. And when the other thing comes in to take its place, that thing isn't there anymore. So we ought to know those things.
I think we have time for 2 questions, and then we're going to wrap it up, and we can go on to the bar for those of you that want to follow. What was the name of the bar?
Mill Valley Tap Room, I think.
Oh, Beerworks? Okay.
Yeah, Beerworks. Beerworks, around the corner on the left. That corner, left. About 70 yards left side.
Will they let us take our own food?
There's plenty of it, and it's delicious.
Everybody has to take a doggy bag home.
Hi there. I don't really need this.
No, you have
is
to
it better?
record it.
Oh, I'm sorry. So, not to throw the cat among the pigeons, but with these camps and everything, who's paying for it? Where are you getting the money to start these? For us to start one up, how do you finance it? Is that not a polite
that's
question?
a very good question. That's a good question. So I hope you will do this, and if you are a donor and you want to give more, there is a way to do that too. But actually, what I think is the ideal outcome is that we have a mass organization. So imagine, we have now several hundred supporting members, and we have some donors who have given larger amounts of money. It seems that if we were going to try to endow entire camps, we need about 300,000 euros to make a very glamping camp. So you basically have teepees and yurts and industrial kitchens and composting toilets and saunas and all the great stuff you hang out, plus tools and seeds and what you need, maybe a vehicle. But actually, you have capital costs in the first year. You could have capital costs in the second and third year if you wanted to upgrade to, say, propagation units, laboratories, something. But the ideal situation is that in the camps, you don't have a big footprint. You're going very softly on the earth so that it doesn't leave any damage. You can move the entire camp, and it's like beautiful. You can't even see that it was there if you do it right. And actually, you should do that. Because once you've restored that place, you ought to move the camp to a really degraded place and start over and do it there. But you will have operating costs every year, and it's food. But if you get smart about this and you immediately plan out huge food forests, then it starts to get very interesting because you pay for your capital costs and then you have very low operational costs, and it gets really interesting. But imagine, so we have hundreds Well, let's say we have 1,000 members. So, or we have 10,000 members, or 100,000 members, or 1 million members. 1 million members is 120 million euros annually. And that's with each individual just sharing 10 euros per month. How many camps can we make? So in this case, if we create a mass movement, if people say, oh, well, I can afford 10 euros per month, all right, so there it is. Then as that grows, if it grows, then humanity is making a decision. It's making a choice. If that becomes 50 million or 100 million, you know, what starts to happen, first of all, people get to set the agenda. And secondly, the politicians will follow. Because as soon as the people make this statement, they're going to go, we have to do that. You know, it was our idea the whole time. You know, so okay, you know, it's better if they decide to do this. The countries, the international agencies, the corporations, they all have to do this anyway. But we don't have to wait for them. We don't need permission to restore the earth. We have a duty to do it.
Well, I think unless there's a burning question, I think that's a
There's-
Short burning question.
Okay, short burning.
How many inches or centimeters of rain out there in Spain per year?
Oh, it's terrifying. Yeah, it's really bad. But actually, remarkably, they started to use the Sepp Holzer style hydrology. They're doing keyline. They're doing all this stuff. They did total revegetation of the place. They just had sheep go through. You'll be happy to note the sheep went through, and you know, they liberally helped the microbial communities as they did that. It only took them a few days to go through there. They were very happy because they had a meal, whereas most of the places they're walking on gravel. So if we do this, you know, it's really more about like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, constantly propagating, constantly planting out, protecting, infiltrating, and retaining all moisture. Snow, when it snows, when it rains, it all must stay. They have giant gullies and erosion. So when it rains, it's going away. So you have to capture it. When you capture it, it starts to infiltrate. Then it becomes a biophysical thing because more vegetation comes. Then the next time, it's more and more and more. So the evolutionary outcome is accumulation. And the cultural outcome is, you know, that. So we need to switch the cultural outcome to align with accumulation. We get back out there somewhere. I won't see it, but future generations will see it. You're back at a climax equilibrium. That's where we need to, that's got to be our goal. So we're doing this. It's fun. It's actually fun and satisfying to do this, but that's the goal. That'll be really fun. So when I was in Lima, I tried to shake hands with an Ecuadorian Indian, and he wouldn't shake hands with me. And I thought, oh, what have I done? And he said, no. I just want to show you how we greet each other. And then he said, put his hand here. You have to put your hand there, and you have to repeat after me. He said, my earth is your earth. And then he said, my heart is your heart. My heart is your heart. And then he said, my spirit is your spirit. My spirit is your spirit. And then he said, we are working together. We are working together. That's a better way to greet. Really fun.
Okay, I think on that note, we need to wrap it up, but whoever thought you'd hear the word fun and climate together, right?
Climate can be fun.
Thank you to John for coming. This is great.
Thank you to Diana for making this happen.
Oh. And I'd like to thank Debbie Friedman there for coming from Concha's Kitchen to help tonight. And I'd like to thank Stas and Marin TV, Omid, for being here, and Alessandra from the Hivery, and thanks to the Good Earth that donated the food very generously.